My parents kicked me out in 11th grade for being pregnant. 22 years later, give us our grandson's wealth. When I opened the door, my answer destroyed them. What grandson? What wealth? My name is Clara. I am 39 years old, and today, I stand at the helm of a multi-million-dollar tech and real estate empire in Austin, Texas. People look at me and see power, stability, and ruthless efficiency. They see a woman who built a fortress from the ground up. But they do not know what the foundation of that fortress is made of. It is not made of inherited wealth or supportive family connections. It is built entirely on a foundation of shattered glass, cold rejection, and a vow I made when I was left with absolutely nothing. 22 years ago, I was not a CEO. I was just a 17-year-old girl, an 11th grader with straight A's, standing in the middle of a pristine, suffocating living room in Dallas. I remember the smell of that room vividly. It smelled of expensive lemon polish, fresh lilies, and absolute hypocrisy. My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely hold the small plastic stick. The 2 pink lines on it felt like a death sentence. Sitting on the cream-colored leather sofa were my parents, Conrad and Diana. They were the picture of Dallas high society. Conrad, an ambitious real estate investor, was always obsessed with image. Diana, a woman whose entire existence revolved around country club luncheons and keeping up appearances, was sipping her afternoon tea. I had spent hours pacing in the bathroom, crying until my eyes were swollen shut, trying to find the words to tell them I was pregnant. When I finally walked into the living room and placed the test on the glass coffee table, the silence that followed was deafening. I waited for the yelling. I waited for my mother to cry or my father to scream about how irresponsible I had been. But the reality was far more chilling. There was no fiery explosion of parental disappointment. Instead, there was an icy, corporate detachment. My father, Conrad, slowly picked up the test, looked at it, and then dropped it back onto the table as if it were a diseased piece of trash. He calmly reached over and adjusted his expensive gold watch. He did not look at my face. He looked at the space just past my shoulder. "Well," Conrad said, his voice completely devoid of any emotion. "This is a complication we will not be dealing with." My mother, Diana, slowly set her teacup down. She examined her perfectly manicured nails, letting out a sharp, irritated sigh. "Conrad, the Henderson Gala is next month. We cannot have her walking around showing. It will ruin our reputation. We will be the laughingstock of the entire neighborhood. I will not have my name dragged through the mud because she decided to throw her life away in the back seat of a car." I stood there, tears streaming down my face, begging them to listen. I told them I was scared. I told them I did not know what to do. I needed my mom. I needed my dad. But to them, I was no longer a daughter. I was a liability. A stain on their perfect, curated life. Without missing a beat, Conrad picked up the home phone from the side table. Right there, right in front of me, he dialed his lawyer's number. I listened in absolute horror as he instructed the man on the other end of the line to draft emancipation papers. He wanted to officially and legally sever all ties with his only child. It was a business transaction. He was cutting his losses. He hung up the phone and finally looked at me. His eyes were dead. "You have 15 minutes to get out of my house," Conrad said. "Take whatever fits in a garbage bag. Leave your house key on the counter. If you ever try to contact us again, if you ever try to drag our name into this mess, I will have you arrested for trespassing. You are dead to us, Clara. Do you understand?" I looked at my mother, pleading with my eyes, hoping for a shred of maternal instinct to kick in. Diana simply turned her head toward the window, refusing to make eye contact. I stumbled up the stairs, my vision blurred by tears. 15 minutes. That was the value of 17 years of my life. I grabbed a black plastic trash bag from the kitchen and shoved in a few changes of clothes, a heavy jacket, and the $60 I had saved up in my desk drawer. I walked downstairs, placed my key on the marble counter, and walked out the front door. I heard the deadbolt slide into place behind me. A heavy, final click. Just like that, I was erased from their world. The Texas heat had given way to a sudden, freezing downpour that evening. I walked down the suburban streets of Dallas, the black trash bag slapping against my leg with every step. My clothes were soaked through, sticking to my skin like ice. I kept looking back over my shoulder, holding on to a pathetic, foolish hope that the front door would fly open, that Conrad would run out in the rain and tell me it was a sick joke, that he was sorry. But the street remained empty. The grand houses with their glowing windows felt like fortresses mocking my sudden exile. I needed help. I needed the one person who shared this burden with me. Dalton. Dalton was 18, a senior at a rival high school. He had charming eyes, a silver-tongued way of talking about our future, and an arrogant confidence that had blinded me. Under the bleachers just a few months prior, he had promised me that we were a team, that he would always take care of me. I clung to those memories as I spotted a flickering street lamp illuminating a rusted payphone outside a closed gas station. My fingers were numb as I pushed some coins into the slot. I dialed his house number, praying he would pick up. After 4 agonizing rings, the line connected. "Hello." Dalton's voice came through, sounding sleepy and completely detached from the nightmare I was living. "Dalton, it is Clara," I choked out, shivering uncontrollably. "My parents found out. They kicked me out. I am at the gas station on Oak Street. I have nowhere to go. Please come get me." There was a long, terrifying pause on the other end. I could hear the sound of the rain beating against the plastic hood of the payphone. "Clara, listen," Dalton finally said, his voice dropping to a panicked whisper. "You cannot be calling me here. My parents are home." "What are you talking about?" I pleaded, my voice cracking. "I am standing in the rain. I am pregnant, Dalton. We have to figure this out." I cannot," he stammered, the smooth confidence completely gone, replaced by the pathetic whimper of a coward. "My dad just paid my tuition for college. If I get dragged into this, he will cut me off. You need to figure this out on your own. Do not call me again." Before I could even scream, I heard a scuffle on the line. Then a sharp, angry woman's voice cut through the receiver. It was Dalton's mother. "Listen to me, you little tramp," she hissed venomously. "Dalton has a bright future ahead of him, and he is not going to ruin it because you could not keep your legs closed. If you ever contact my son again, if you try to pin this bastard child on him, we will destroy you. We will bury you in legal fees until you cannot breathe. Do you understand me? Stay away from our family." The line went dead. A busy signal echoed in my ear, mimicking the flatline of my hope. I slowly hung up the phone. The physical cold was nothing compared to the absolute hollow freezing spreading through my chest. 2 days later, while staying at a dirty youth shelter on the edge of town, a letter arrived for me. It was a formal cease and desist from Dalton's family lawyer, legally denying any paternity and threatening severe harassment charges if I came near their property. I was entirely, utterly alone. The people who were supposed to protect me had thrown me to the wolves. The boy who whispered promises of forever treated me like an infectious disease. As I sat on a broken cot in that shelter, clutching the legal thread in my hands, something inside me broke. But it did not break into pieces that could be swept away. It broke like a bone that heals back thicker, harder, and entirely numb. The frightened 17-year-old girl died in that shelter. In her place, a quiet, terrifying resolve began to take root. I packed my trash bag, walked to the highway, and stuck my thumb out. I was heading to Austin. Austin, Texas, was a sprawling beast of a city, far less forgiving than the manicured lawns of Dallas. The first few weeks were a crash course in brutal survival. The $60 I brought with me vanished into thin air, spent on cheap bread and bottled water. I quickly learned the rules of the streets. I learned which parks had the safest benches, how to hide my small frame in the shadows to avoid the predatory stares of passing men, and how to ration my energy. Sleeping on concrete is a specific kind of torture. The cold seeps through your clothes, invading your muscles, making your joints ache with a dull, constant throb. The humidity of the Texas night felt like a wet blanket suffocating me. But the physical pain was secondary to the gnawing fear in my stomach. I was carrying a child I could barely feed. I tried to find work, walking into diners, grocery stores, and laundromats. But one look at my exhausted face, my unwashed clothes, and my lack of a permanent address, and the managers would shake their heads. "Sorry, kid. No openings," they would say, their eyes full of pity or disgust. I existed in a state of constant, low-level panic. Then, the true nightmare began. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting in the cramped, filthy bathroom of a 24-hour public diner, trying to wash my face in the sink. A sharp, tearing pain suddenly ripped through my lower abdomen. It was so intense it dropped me to my knees on the sticky tile floor. I doubled over, gasping for air, clutching my stomach as the pain radiated through my back. I knew. Deep down, I knew what was happening. The stress, the starvation, the endless nights sleeping on hard concrete had taken their toll. My body was failing. I managed to drag myself out of the diner and flag down a passing police car. They called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the county hospital. The lights were blinding, the voices clinical and rushed. I remember lying on the gurney, staring at the fluorescent ceiling tiles, praying to a God I was not sure I believed in anymore. "Please," I whispered to the empty air. "Take everything else, but leave me this." But the universe does not trade in fairness. The doctor, a tired-looking man with a clipboard, came into the recovery room hours later. He did not sugarcoat it. The pregnancy was gone. The stress and malnutrition had caused a severe miscarriage. I lay in that hospital bed for 2 days. The nurses treated me with a clinical detachment reserved for vagrants. They saw a homeless teenage runaway who had lost a problem, not a mother who had lost a child. When they finally discharged me, they handed me a small stack of paperwork and pointed me toward the exit. I walked out of the sliding glass doors into the blinding Texas sun, feeling lighter, but entirely hollow. I had $10 left from a charity voucher the hospital social worker had given me. I walked to a nearby thrift store. I did not buy food. I walked to the back aisle and bought a small, cheap, yellow knitted baby blanket. It cost $3. I took it out of the store, went to a quiet corner of a public park, and held it to my chest. I did not cry. My tear ducts were completely dry. The grief I felt was too massive, too heavy to be expressed in tears. Instead, a profound, terrifying clarity washed over me. Conrad, Diana, Dalton. They had driven me to this. Their cowardice and their obsession with their pathetic reputations had pushed me onto the street and killed the only innocent thing in my life. Sitting there on the dying grass, clutching that $3 yellow blanket, I made a vow to the empty sky. I would not die on these streets. I would survive. I would build a life so massive, a fortress so impenetrable, that its shadow would eventually blot out their sun. I would gather wealth, power, and influence. And then I would wait. Because I knew, with absolute certainty, that greedy people never change. One day, they would see my success. They would come crawling back, demanding a piece of the pie. And when they did, I would be ready to serve them a feast of absolute ruin. 2 weeks after the hospital, I was back to starving in Zilker Park. My clothes hung loosely on my frail frame, and my eyes had the hollow, sunken look of someone who had given up on expecting kindness from the world. It was a crisp, early morning. The sun was just beginning to break over the Austin skyline, painting the clouds in shades of bruised purple. I was curled up on a bench, shivering in my thin jacket, when a sleek, black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb nearby. An older woman stepped out, walking a well-groomed golden retriever. She wore a tailored cashmere coat that probably cost more than my parents' mortgage. She had sharp, calculating silver eyes that missed absolutely nothing. This was Celeste. I tried to pull my jacket tighter, turning my face away so she would not look at me with the usual mix of pity and revulsion. But the dog pulled toward my bench, sniffing at my worn-out shoes. Celeste did not pull the leash back. She stopped and looked at me. Really looked at me. "You're freezing, girl," Celeste said. Her voice was firm, raspy, carrying a heavy Texas drawl that commanded immediate attention. "I am fine," I lied, my voice cracking through a parched throat. "Do not insult my intelligence," she snapped back, though not unkindly. "You are starving, you are freezing, and you look like you are carrying the weight of a dead world on those thin shoulders." She did not offer me a $5 bill. She did not point me to a shelter. She simply said, "My car is warm. I am going to get breakfast. You are coming with me. If you try to steal my purse, my dog will bite you. Deal?" I was too tired to argue. I climbed into the passenger seat. The car smelled overwhelmingly of rich leather and lavender. That scent, lavender, would become the smell of my salvation. Celeste took me to a private, upscale diner. She ordered me a massive plate of eggs, bacon, and toast, and sat across the booth, sipping black coffee while I devoured the food like a feral animal. She did not ask about my past. She did not ask for a tragic backstory. "I own a chain of boutique hotels across the state," Celeste stated plainly when I finally put my fork down. "I need a cleaning crew girl for the downtown location. Minimum wage. The hours are garbage. You will scrub toilets, change sheets, and deal with entitled rich people. But it comes with a tiny basement room you can sleep in. I do not do charity. You will earn your keep. Do you want it?" I looked at her, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Yes," I said. No hesitation. That was the beginning. I moved into a windowless concrete room beneath the grand lobby of Celeste's flagship hotel. I scrubbed floors until my knuckles bled. I learned the rhythm of the hospitality business. But more importantly, I learned from Celeste. She was a widow who had ruthlessly built her empire after her husband left her with nothing but debts. She recognized the same hardened, dead look in my eyes. Once a week, she would call me up to her lavish penthouse office. Not to chat, but to drill me. "Stop looking at the floor, Clara," she would bark as I helped file her paperwork. "Look people in the eye. People are weak. They broadcast their insecurities. Read their faces. Turn their complaints into your leverage." I absorbed everything. I was a sponge soaking up blood and knowledge. Within a year, I moved from the cleaning crew to the front desk. From the front desk, I moved to managing inventory. I worked 16-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and the burning hatred I harbored for Dallas. At night, in my tiny room, I devoured books on corporate law, real estate investments, and profit margins. Celeste taught me the most crucial lesson of my life. One evening, looking over a contract, she pointed her pen at me. "Do not seek revenge with anger, Clara. Anger is sloppy. Anger burns the house down with you inside it. Build an empire they can never touch and let their own greed hang them. Use their weaknesses as your tools." I took that lesson and carved it into my bones. By the time I turned 18, I had transformed. I was no longer the frightened girl crying in the rain. I was the assistant manager of Celeste's most profitable hotel. I had a steady salary, a sharp wardrobe of discounted business suits, and a bank account that I guarded like a dragon hoarding gold. But despite the safety, the quiet moments were unbearable. Every time I saw a mother holding a child in the hotel lobby, a phantom pain would shoot through my stomach. The memory of the hospital, of the tiny yellow blanket locked in a safe box under my bed, haunted me. I realized that all the money in the world could not fill the terrifying silence in my chest. I needed a family. But I refused to trust biology ever again. Blood meant nothing. Blood was what Conrad and Diana shared with me, and they had tossed me away. I wanted to choose my family. I took a week of unpaid leave and drove to a private, heavily vetted closed adoption agency in Central Texas. Due to my age, it was nearly impossible, but Celeste pulled strings, acting as my character witness and financial guarantor. I walked through the sterile halls of the foster home until I saw him. He was an 8-month-old baby boy. He had been surrendered at birth. He had wide, observant brown eyes that looked at the world not with fear, but with an intense, quiet curiosity. He reached his tiny hand out through the bars of his crib and gripped my finger with surprising strength. In that exact second, the ice around my heart cracked just enough to let him in. I named him Arlo. The day the adoption papers were finalized, I held Arlo in my arms in Celeste's office. I looked down at his sleeping face and made a silent pact. I would not just raise him with love. I would raise him with armor. He would be my son, my anchor, and eventually, the ultimate weapon against the people who had tried to destroy me. I practiced radical honesty with Arlo. As he grew up, I never fed him fairy tales about a big, happy extended family. When he was old enough to understand, sitting on the carpet of our first real apartment, I told him the truth. I told him about the cold living room in Dallas. I told him about the rain, the payphone, and the hospital. You do not have grandparents, Arlo, I told him, looking directly into his young eyes. You have biological ghosts in Dallas who care only about money and reputation. They are monsters disguised in expensive suits. We're a team, just you and me. And one day, they will try to take what we build. We have to be smarter than them. Arlo did not flinch. He absorbed the truth with a maturity far beyond his years. He viewed me not just as a mother, but as a survivor he admired deeply. He shared my disdain for the ghosts of my past. As Arlo grew, it became undeniably clear that he was not just a smart child, he was a prodigy. By the time he was 10, he was taking apart computers and rebuilding them. By 14, he was writing complex code that I could barely comprehend. I funneled every spare dollar I had into his education. I bought him servers, enrolled him in advanced coding boot camps, and hired private tutors. I was building a genius, and I was giving him the ultimate head start. Because I knew the corporate world better than anyone. I knew that a brilliant mind combined with infinite resources was an unstoppable force. A decade vanished in a blur of relentless work, aggressive investments, and strategic expansion. My life was a machine operating at maximum efficiency. When I was 29, Celeste passed away peacefully in her sleep. It was a devastating blow, but she had prepared me for it. In her will, she shocked the Texas hospitality industry by leaving me the majority shares of her boutique hotel chain and complete control over a massive trust fund. She left a note on top of the legal documents, "You earned it, kid. Now go crush them." I took Celeste's hotel fortune and aggressively pivoted. I sold off underperforming properties and began buying up commercial real estate in Austin right as the tech boom hit the city. By my mid-30s, Clara Thorne was a name whispered with respect and a little bit of fear in Texas business circles. I owned the buildings where the biggest tech startups operated. I was wealthy beyond my wildest dreams, but I lived quietly, fiercely guarding my privacy and Arlo's identity. Arlo, now approaching his early 20s, was fulfilling every ounce of the potential I had cultivated. With my financial backing and his staggering intellect, he bypassed the traditional college route and launched his own tech company. He built a revolutionary logistics software program that optimized supply chain management using artificial intelligence. It was brilliant, efficient, and immediately caught the attention of major Silicon Valley investors. We operated in perfect synchronization. I handled the brutal corporate negotiations, the legal structuring, and the financial leveraging. Arlo handled the innovation. We were an impenetrable unit. The empire was finally built. The fortress was complete, its walls reinforced with steel and millions of dollars. I sat in my corner office overlooking downtown Austin, sipping black coffee. I pulled out a locked drawer in my desk. Inside sat the cheap, $3 yellow baby blanket. I ran my thumb over the frayed yarn. I had survived. I had won. But winning was not enough. I needed them to know I had won. I needed to dangle the meat over the shark tank and watch the water turn red. It had been 22 years since Conrad told me I was dead to them. 22 years since Dalton's mother threatened to bury me. My empire was ready, and my son was a rising star in the exact industry that Conrad and Dalton worshipped. It was time to open the gates and let the monsters in. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this dramatic revenge story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. And don't forget to leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you so much. Now, let's see how those greedy people will fall into the trap. Arlo turned 21, and the empire we built together was operating flawlessly. His software company had just finalized a massive contract with a national shipping conglomerate. Wall Street analysts and tech bloggers were buzzing about his artificial intelligence logistics program. The internal valuation of his company hit $50 million. He was a certified prodigy, and I was the silent, iron-fisted chairperson holding the strings of the real estate that housed all these tech giants. It was time to cast the line into the murky waters of Dallas and Houston. But I could not just call them. That would be too obvious. Greedy people are inherently suspicious of free meals. You have to make them think they discovered the gold mine on their own. You have to make them think they are outsmarting you. I hired an elite, highly discreet public relations firm based in New York. I paid them a ridiculous sum of money with one very specific, very strange directive. I needed them to orchestrate a controlled leak of information. I wanted articles, blog posts, and financial profiles written about Arlo's success, but they had to be aggressively pushed into specific business networks in Texas. I targeted the exact LinkedIn circles, country club newsletters, and regional business forums that Conrad and Dalton frequented. I made sure the articles heavily emphasized two things. First, the staggering $50 million valuation of the company. Second, the name of his mother and primary investor, Clara Thorne. The headlines were designed to be irresistible bait. Local Austin tech heir set to inherit the Thorne real estate empire, and how Clara Thorne and her son built a $50 million legacy. I knew exactly what I was doing because I had spent the last 2 years having a private investigator dig into their lives. I knew their weaknesses. Conrad was drowning. His old-school commercial real estate business in Dallas had taken a massive hit during the recent economic downturn. He had over-leveraged his assets to maintain his lavish country club lifestyle with Diana, and now the banks were circling like vultures. He was secretly putting properties up for sale at a loss just to keep the lights on. He was desperate for cash to save his precious reputation. Dalton was in an even worse position. The golden boy who was too good for me had peaked in college. He tried to launch a cryptocurrency startup a few years ago that turned out to be a massive failure. He had cut corners, and now the Internal Revenue Service was auditing him. My investigator found out Dalton owed the government nearly $500,000 in back taxes. He was looking at potential prison time if he could not find a massive influx of cash. They were both desperate, drowning men. And I had just strategically placed a $50 million life raft right in their line of sight. All I had to do was sit back in my leather office chair, sip my coffee, and wait for them to take the bait. You do not go to war without generals, and I had the best in the state. I turned my executive boardroom into a literal war room. I brought in the two people I trusted most in the professional world to help me execute the final phase of my plan. First was Bennett. Bennett was my lead corporate attorney. He was a brilliant, ruthless legal shark who wore tailored suits and treated litigation like a blood sport. He had a mind like a steel trap and absolutely zero moral objections to legally destroying people who deserved it. Second was Avery. Avery was a cybersecurity specialist I had poached from a federal agency a few years prior. She was a quiet, intensely focused woman who preferred the glow of computer monitors to human interaction. If Bennett was my sword, Avery was my spyglass. I sat them down at the long mahogany table, slid a manila folder across the wood, and told them the entire story. I told them about the rain, the disownment, the cowardice, and the hospital room. I told them that the biological ghosts of my past were about to come looking for a payday, and I wanted to trap them in a legal and digital web so tight they would never breathe free air again. Bennett smiled, a sharp, predatory grin. Avery simply opened her laptop and cracked her knuckles. Avery immediately went to work setting up digital tripwires. We had planted specific, unique tracking links within the PR articles we had seeded in their networks. Avery built a custom dashboard that monitored exactly who was clicking on those articles and from where. It took exactly 4 days for the dashboard to light up. "We have a bite," Avery said one afternoon, not looking away from her dual screens. "Multiple hits from a corporate IP address in Dallas. It is registered to Conrad's real estate firm." They are lingering on the page, reading the financial breakdown of Arlo's company. A few hours later, Avery flagged another hit. Got another one. Residential IP address in Houston. Dalton's apartment. Over the next week, Avery's tracking software painted a pathetic, predictable picture of human greed. We watched in real time as their internet search histories, which Avery managed to scrape using a few highly questionable, untraceable methods, revealed their true intentions. They were not searching for Clara Thorne contact information to apologize. They were searching for money. Avery read the search queries aloud to Bennett and me in the boardroom. Conrad is searching for Texas grandparent visitation rights and how to contest a private trust fund, Avery reported, her voice flat with disgust. Dalton is searching for statute of limitations on establishing paternity in Texas and can a biological father claim tech startup equity. Bennett let out a dry, mocking laugh. They actually think they have a legal leg to stand on. They are planning to claim familial rights to the boy's assets. Let them, I said, staring out the window at the Austin skyline. I want them to spend every last dime they have on lawyers. I want them to think they are inches away from a massive payout. The trap was set, the monitors were glowing, and the monsters were finally creeping out of the dark. The first physical move came 2 weeks later. I was sitting at my desk when my assistant brought in a massive, ridiculously expensive gift basket. It was overflowing with imported chocolates, gourmet coffees, and a very expensive bottle of wine. It was wrapped in perfectly tied gold ribbons. I pulled the small, embossed card from the envelope attached to the handle. It read, "To our brilliant daughter Clara and our incredibly talented grandson. We are so proud of everything you have built. It has been too long. Family belongs together. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at the word daughter. 22 years ago, I was a liability, a stain, a problem to be erased. Now that I was sitting on an empire, I was their brilliant daughter. The sheer audacity of it made me want to throw the basket through the window, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was part of the game. An hour later, my personal cell phone, a number I kept highly restricted, buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was. "Clara, it is Dalton. I saw the news about Arlo's software launch. He looks just like me. I have spent the last 2 decades regretting my mistakes. I was just a stupid kid back then. Please, let me make it right. I want to be a father to my son. Let us meet up. Coffee is on me." I showed the message to Bennett. He raised an eyebrow. "What is the play here, Clara? You ignore them, they might give up and slink back to their miserable lives." "No," I said, my voice cold. "If I ignore them, they will just try again later. I have to make them think I am weak. I have to make them think the scared 17-year-old girl is still inside me, desperately craving their approval. I need them to overplay their hand." I took a deep breath and drafted my responses. I intentionally used terrible grammar and a frantic, emotional tone. I wanted to sound overwhelmed, fragile, and emotionally broken. To my parents, I sent an email. I received the basket. I do not know what to say. It has been so long and it still hurts so much. I am not ready to talk to you. Please give me time. I am so overwhelmed right now. To Dalton, I sent a text message. "Dalton, why now? You broke my heart." I raised him all by myself. "I cannot handle seeing you right now. Please do not pressure me." It was the perfect bait. To a predator, a response like that is blood in the water. It signaled that I was not a hardened CEO, but a vulnerable, emotional wreck who is still deeply traumatized by the past. It told them that my defenses were down, and that a little bit of pressure would shatter my resolve entirely. I hit send on both messages and tossed my phone onto the desk. "They will not give you time," Bennett noted, adjusting his tie. "They are broke. They will smell the weakness and try to force their way in." "I know," I replied, a small, dark smile touching the corners of my mouth. "And when they come knocking, we are going to open the door." Bennett was absolutely right. They did not give me time. 3 days after I sent those intentionally weak messages, the security intercom at my private, gated estate buzzed. It was a Saturday morning. Arlo was out of town at a tech conference, which was perfect. I was alone in the house, save for the state-of-the-art security system Avery had upgraded for me. I walked over to the security monitor in my kitchen and pressed the camera feed button. Standing at my front gate, looking impatient and entitled, were 3 ghosts. Conrad looked significantly older, his hair completely gray, the expensive suit he wore looking a little too loose, a little too worn around the edges. Diana was standing next to him, clutching a designer handbag like a shield, her face pulled tight with forced politeness. And standing just behind them, looking nervous and sweaty, was Dalton. They had actually teamed up. The broke real estate agent, the desperate socialite, and the tax-evading coward had formed an alliance to secure the bag. I pressed a button on my phone, silently alerting Avery and Bennett that the confrontation was happening. Avery immediately began recording the high-definition audio and video from my porch cameras to a secure cloud server. I buzzed the gate open and walked out to the grand front porch to meet them. As they walked up the driveway, taking in the manicured lawns, the fountains, and the sheer size of the estate, I could see the dollar signs flashing in their eyes. Their greed was palpable. It radiated off them like heat off a Texas highway. "Clara. Oh, my sweet girl," Diana cried out, rushing forward with her arms wide open, painting a look of absolute maternal agony on her face. I took a deliberate step back, wrapping my arms around myself, playing the role of the terrified, traumatized victim to perfection. "What are you doing here?" I asked, making my voice tremble. "I told you I was not ready. I told you I needed time." "We could not wait, Clara," Conrad said, stepping forward, trying to project his old patriarchal authority. 22 years is long enough. We are a family. It is time to put the past behind us. We want to see our grandson. We have a right to know him." Dalton stepped up beside them, trying to look deeply remorseful. "Clara, please. I am his father. I have rights too. You cannot keep my son away from me forever. I just want to be part of his life. We want to share in his success." "Share in his success?" I repeated, letting out a small, breathless gasp as if the words physically hurt me. "You do not care about him. You just saw the news about the software valuation. You just want his money." "Do not be dramatic, Clara," Conrad snapped, his mask slipping for just a fraction of a second, revealing the cold, calculating man I remembered. "He is our blood. The Thorne legacy belongs to this family. We are simply here to claim our rightful place in his life and his future." I looked at the three of them, standing on my porch, boldly demanding the wealth of a child they had aggressively discarded. I forced a few tears into my eyes, backing away toward the door. "You have no right to his wealth," I whispered, my voice shaking with perfectly acted fear. "Leave me alone. All of you. Do not ever come back here." I slammed the heavy wooden door in their faces and locked it. I leaned against the door, listening to them argue on the porch for a few minutes before they finally gave up and walked back down the driveway. I wiped the fake tears from my eyes and walked back to the kitchen. My phone rang. It was Bennett. "Avery got the whole thing," Bennett said, sounding highly amused. "Crystal clear audio. Conrad explicitly claiming a right to the boy's future and assets. Dalton claiming paternal rights. It is beautiful." "They took the bait," I said, pouring myself a glass of iced water. "Now, let us make them turn on each other." The beauty of greedy people is that they have absolutely zero loyalty. Conrad, Diana, and Dalton had allied out of mutual desperation, but they did not trust each other for a second. Avery and I decided to exploit that paranoia and turn it into a weapon. Avery was an absolute artist when it came to digital manipulation. Operating through a series of untraceable, encrypted email accounts and proxy servers, she began dropping digital breadcrumbs to blow their fragile alliance apart. First, Avery sent an anonymous email to Conrad's private work address. The email claimed to be from a disgruntled paralegal at a Houston law firm. It contained a fabricated, but incredibly realistic-looking, legal draft suggesting that Dalton was secretly preparing a sole custody and paternity lawsuit behind Conrad's back to secure 100% of Arlo's tech equity for himself. Then, Avery went after Dalton. She sent a text message to his phone from a burner number with an Austin area code. The message included a fake screenshot of an email supposedly written by Conrad to a private investigator, asking for dirt on Dalton's crypto tax fraud, so they could use it to blackmail him into giving up his parental claim. The results were instantaneous and explosive. Avery monitored their communications as the paranoia took hold. We intercepted furious, panicked emails between Conrad and Dalton. Conrad accused Dalton of being a backstabbing rat. Dalton fired back, calling Conrad a bankrupt, manipulative dinosaur. They were tearing each other apart over a pile of gold that did not even exist. But their mutual panic forced them into a reckless, desperate corner. They realized that if they kept fighting each other, neither of them would get the money. They needed a legally binding agreement to ensure they both got a cut of my empire before the other could steal it. 3 weeks after the porch confrontation, Bennett walked into my office, holding a massive stack of legal documents. He dropped them on my desk with a heavy thud. "They did it," Bennett said, a massive grin spreading across his face. "They actually did it. I did not think they would be stupid enough, but desperation makes people blind." I picked up the top document. It was a formal, multi-million-dollar lawsuit filed in the state of Texas. Conrad and Diana were suing me under a twisted interpretation of Texas grandparent visitation rights, claiming I had subjected Arlo to severe alienation of affection and emotional abuse by hiding his family from him. They were demanding immediate access to him and a court-ordered restructuring of the Thorne Family Trust to include them as beneficiaries. Attached to their suit was a joint filing from Dalton. He was formally demanding a DNA test to establish paternity, followed by a lawsuit for half of my entire estate, claiming that I had maliciously hidden his heir from him and caused him severe emotional distress. They were demanding millions of dollars, equity in Arlo's company, and control over my properties. They had put all their chips on the table. They had hired expensive lawyers on credit, undoubtedly promising to pay them out of the massive settlement they believed I would offer to keep the scandal quiet. "This is completely frivolous," Bennett said, tapping the paper. "Any judge with half a brain would throw this out after a 10-minute hearing. I can have this dismissed by Tuesday." "No," I said, my eyes scanning the signatures at the bottom of the page. "Conrad Thorne, Diana Thorne, Dalton Cross. Do not dismiss it. Accept the service. Let them think they have a legitimate case. Let them rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. I do not want to fight this in a quiet courtroom." I looked up at Bennett, the memory of the cold rain in Dallas burning in my mind. "Arlo is giving the keynote address at the Austin Tech Summit next month. Conrad and Dalton will be there, hoping to corner him publicly. We are going to execute them on stage, in front of everyone they know." The Austin Tech Summit was the premier business event of the year in Texas. The grand ballroom of the convention center was packed with over 1,000 industry leaders, venture capitalists, journalists, and tech innovators. The lights were dimmed, and a massive, 50-foot LED screen dominated the stage. Arlo was the guest of honor, scheduled to give the opening keynote address about the future of logistics algorithms. It was his moment, but he knew exactly what we were going to do. We had planned it down to the second. I stood behind the heavy black curtains off stage, wearing a sharply tailored white suit. Bennett stood next to me, holding a sleek black leather briefcase. Avery was up in the sound and lighting booth, having seamlessly integrated her own laptop into the summit's presentation feed. I peeked through the curtain and scanned the front row of the audience. The VIP section. And there they were. Conrad and Diana sat dead center, dressed in their finest, albeit slightly outdated, Dallas high society attire. Conrad looked incredibly smug, leaning back in his chair like he owned the building. Diana was flashing her fake, practiced smiles at the tech executives sitting nearby. Dalton sat 2 seats down, wearing a cheap suit he probably bought on credit, nervously checking his watch. They had shown up expecting a public reconciliation or a panicked, whispered settlement offer in the back room to prevent them from causing a scene. They thought they had me completely cornered. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of the year's most revolutionary logistics AI, Arlo Thorne." The crowd erupted into applause. But Arlo did not walk out. Instead, the lights shifted, and I walked onto the center of the stage. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. I walked straight to the glass podium, tapped the microphone, and looked directly down at the VIP section. Conrad's smug smile vanished instantly. Dalton sat straight up, his face turning pale. "Good morning," I said, my voice echoing through the massive ballroom, steady and cold as ice. "My son, Arlo, will be out in a moment. But before we discuss the future of technology, we need to handle a matter of the past. A matter of legacy. A matter of blood." I locked eyes with Conrad. He looked terrified. He started to half stand up, but Bennett walked out from the wings and stood right behind me, opening his briefcase. The sight of my lead attorney on stage made Conrad freeze in his seat. For the past month, the three people sitting in the front row, Conrad, Diana, and Dalton, have been attempting to extort me for millions of dollars, I said clearly. The crowd collectively gasped. Cell phones immediately shot up into the air, recording every second. The journalists in the back row scrambled for their recorders. They have filed a massive, incredibly public lawsuit claiming rights to my empire and my son's software company, based entirely on the unbreakable bond of family blood and paternal rights, I continued, pacing slowly across the stage. I nodded to the sound booth. Avery hit a key on her laptop. The massive LED screen behind me lit up. It did not show a presentation about artificial intelligence. It showed a high-resolution scan of a legal document from 22 years ago. This is an emancipation and disownment document, I told the silent, shocked room. Drafted 22 years ago by Conrad Thorne. It legally severs all ties with his 17-year-old daughter because she became pregnant, which he deemed an unacceptable risk to his country club reputation. He gave me exactly 15 minutes to pack a trash bag and leave. The screen shifted. It showed the cease and desist letter from Dalton's family lawyer. And this, I said, pointing at the screen, is a legal threat from the biological father, Dalton, explicitly denying paternity and threatening to have me arrested for harassment if I ever asked him for help. I looked down at them. Diana had her hands over her face. Dalton was visibly shaking. Conrad was gripping the armrests of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. You demanded my wealth. You demanded my son's company. You claimed that blood gives you the right to step back into the life of the child you threw away in the rain, I said, my voice rising, filling the room with absolute authority. But there is one massive, fatal flaw in your multi-million-dollar lawsuit. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Every camera lens, every eye in the room was fixed on the three pathetic figures sitting in the front row. Conrad suddenly stood up, his face flushed dark red with panic and rage. He had lost control, and he knew it. You cannot do this, Conrad shouted, his voice cracking, pointing a trembling finger at me. This is a private family matter. That boy is my grandson. He is our blood, and we have a legal right to his legacy. Dalton stood up next to him, desperation making him reckless. I am his father, Clara. You hid my own flesh and blood from me for 2 decades. The court will give me my rightful equity. I stared at them, absorbing their panic. I let them shout their demands into the silent room. I wanted everyone to hear exactly what they were after. Then I leaned into the microphone. What grandson? I asked, my voice dropping to a quiet, devastating whisper that carried through the speakers. What blood? I nodded to the booth one last time. Avery executed the final command. The screen behind me flashed bright white. The old legal letters vanished, replaced by 2 new documents placed side by side. On the left was a medical record from an Austin County hospital, dated 22 years ago. It bore my name. The diagnosis was highlighted in bright yellow, severe stress-induced miscarriage. On the right was a heavily redacted, but legally certified, State of Texas Certificate of Adoption, dated 4 years later. It showed my name as the sole adoptive parent of a baby boy named Arlo. The collective shock of the audience manifested in a massive, audible wave of murmurs and camera flashes. I looked directly into Conrad's eyes, watching his entire world crumble into dust. The child you threw away, the bloodline you are so desperately trying to claim, died on the filthy tile floor of a public bathroom 22 years ago, I said, my voice finally letting out a fraction of the raw anger I had held onto for decades. Because I was starving on the streets you forced me onto. Diana let out a horrifying, strangled sob and collapsed back into her chair. Dalton staggered backward as if he had been physically punched in the chest, his mouth opening and closing silently. Arlo is my chosen son, I continued, my voice ringing with absolute triumph. He shares exactly 0% of your DNA. You have no legal rights. You have no blood ties. You have absolutely nothing. I gestured to Bennett, who stepped forward to the microphone. As of this morning, Bennett announced in his sharp, professional tone, we have filed an aggressive countersuit against Conrad Thorne, Diana Thorne, and Dalton Cross for extortion, malicious prosecution, and severe defamation. Furthermore, the district attorney has been forwarded evidence of Mr. Cross attempting to use this fraudulent lawsuit to hide assets from his ongoing federal tax audit. The trap had snapped completely shut. The guillotine had fallen. Security, I called out calmly. Please escort these 3 trespassers off the premises. 6 large, uniformed security guards moved swiftly down the center aisle. They surrounded the VIP section. Conrad tried to argue, his face pale and slick with sweat, but a guard firmly grabbed his arm. They hauled him out of the row. Diana followed, sobbing into her hands, her precious reputation permanently obliterated in front of the most powerful people in the state. Dalton was practically dragged out by his collar, looking completely broken. I stood on the stage and watched them take the long, humiliating walk up the center aisle, hundreds of cameras flashing in their faces, recording their absolute destruction. They walked out of the double doors and they were gone. Arlo walked out from the wings. He looked at the empty seats in the front row, then looked at me and smiled. He stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the stunned crowd. Now, Arlo said smoothly, let us talk about the future. The fallout was catastrophic and immediate. By Monday morning, the video of the summit had gone incredibly viral across every major business network. Conrad's remaining investors pulled out instantly, citing moral turpitude and reputational risk. His real estate firm filed for bankruptcy 3 weeks later. Dalton's attempt to claim fake tech equity alerted the federal authorities to his exact location and financial desperation. He was indicted for tax fraud and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. They wanted my empire. Instead, I gave them the absolute, devastating truth. I am sitting in my office today, looking out over the city I conquered. My empire is secure, Arlo is thriving, and the ghosts of my past are finally dead and buried under a mountain of their own greed. I kept the cheap yellow baby blanket in my desk drawer. It is a reminder that the strongest steel is forged in the coldest fires. Revenge, when planned with patience and executed with absolute precision, is the sweetest thing in the world. But yesterday, a crumpled envelope arrived at my office. It was from Diana. She is currently living in a cheap, run-down motel outside of Dallas. Conrad left her when the money dried up. The letter inside was pathetic. She begged for forgiveness. She begged for a small monthly allowance just to buy groceries, claiming that despite everything, she is still my mother and deserves one last chance to start over. I read the letter twice. Then I put it through the paper shredder. So tell me, am I wrong for shredding the letter and ignoring her while she rots in the hell she helped create? Or should I show her the mercy they never showed a terrified 17-year-old girl standing in the rain? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now for more stories where karma doesn't just knock, it kicks the door down. Drop your thoughts in the comments below.